everyone, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. For today's video, I wanted to talk about Beartown by Fredrik Backman. And I finished this book maybe like 10 days ago and I can't stop thinking about it. And I know it came out a couple years ago and I know I'm like one of the last people to read it. But I also recommended it to two friends of mine who hadn't heard of it and obviously then hadn't read it. So I figure maybe there's some other people out there who haven't read the book and are curious about it. Or maybe people just enjoy listening to other people do book reviews on books they've already read. But I'm going to keep this spoiler free in case you are here because you haven't read it and you just have some curiosity about it. And let's just talk about the book. So Beartown was a book that I had been hearing a lot about, but honestly, I just wasn't listening. And it was showing up on like everybody's lists and people were talking about it. And I think there was like part of it where it was like, kind of like there was like this just huge outpouring for it. And it was kind of like, I'm not going to fall for the hype. And it was like, I have enough books to read already. I don't need another one. And in my head, I don't know why, I thought it was YA. And I don't have any hate on YA. It's not like usually my go-to. But I just sort of, didn't pay it much mind. And finally, I wised up, started listening, actually started reading some things about it, spoiler free, and the light bulb went off that I might really be missing out on something incredible. So being cheap about it, I didn't want to buy it just in case I didn't like it. So I put my name on kind of every library list and Libby and all of that stuff for audiobooks or regular books or whatever I could get my hands on, and just kind of went about my business. And my library finally kind of gave me the call. Like I got called up to the majors here and the book came in and good God. I mean, I honestly, I can't believe it took me this long to read it and I don't know what the heck I was like hesitant about, but so before I even talk about the book itself, let's just talk about the writing of the book. This is such an incredibly well-written book, and this is my first and only Fredrik Backman book that I've ever read. I completely get why people love him. I get why people rave about him and why there's so much hype around him, because he is such an incredibly talented writer. Like, I have major writer envy with his words, and it's the words, it's the storytelling, it's the images that he describes, it's the atmosphere that he describes, it's the characters he creates, it's the dialogue he creates, it's the authenticity to the dialogue. It just, from beginning to end, I think it was like on page 2, there was a phrase, and I wish I had it in front of me, but it was like the people kind of like punching the clocks, going to work. And he had something about it. And I literally just was like, it was like, man, like this guy can write. And what I started to do, because I had a library book of this, I had like a giant Post-it on the front of the library book, and I was writing down the page numbers that had kind of phrases or lines or anything that was meaningful to me, because if it was my book, I'd be underlining it and dog-earing it. But by the time I sort of filled up the front of that Post-it, and I wasn't even like a third of the way through the book, I realized you just got to get the book and do it yourself. So the writing, hands down, is incredible. Incredible. Cannot say enough good things about it. And then we have the story of Beartown. So I'm going to keep this spoiler free and just kind of talk about like what's on the back of the book and those types of things. And Beartown is a story about Beartown, which is a small town in Sweden, and it's kind of very isolated and a bit industrial and not really affluent, and it's kind of like a factory town, and a lot of people who live there were sort of born and bred there. There's not a ton of people who come there from the outside, and it's just kind of like a very tight-knit community, and it's a community whose lives revolve around ice hockey. And where we are in the story right now is we've got this junior ice hockey team who's like gearing up for the semifinals, and they are high school boys. So I think they're like 16, 17 years old. And the town has not been in a position to sort of win a semifinal in, I don't know, like 15 years or something like that, if not longer. So all eyes are on this. And if the boys win the semis and win the finals, it could mean so much to this town in terms of not just the notoriety of winning, but it will bring attention and sponsorships and money, not really like tourism per se, but it will help the economy of the town, it'll help the people of the town, and sort of all of this burden is resting on the shoulders of these boys. And you have kind of all the boys in the hockey team, and then there are so many characters that you meet in this book, but not in a way that's confusing or hard to follow in any kind of a way. And you've got the coaches, you've got all the people motivated on that staff, you've got the townsfolk, you've got the parents, you've got sort of the extended families, brothers, sisters, all of that kind of stuff, and everyone has their own motivations sort of outside of hockey and what is going on with them and their lives. And it's very intricate and it's very complicated with their stories. And, kind of this semifinals winds up being a catalyst for this violent assault against one of the girls. And it turns, it traumatizes her understandably, and it sort of turns the entire town into turmoil. And probably the first, at least third, if not more, of the book is kind of building up to this semifinal. So, like I said, you meet all these cast of characters and you really get to know them and understand them and their relationships and their connections and sort of what's on the line for them and what they want and what their aims and goals are, whether it's, the high school kids or the parents or, some of these extended, the town folk. And then something happens and then it becomes the aftermath of it and how all of these people deal with it and how it impacts everybody. So this book, like I said at the beginning, you don't need to understand ice hockey. You don't need to like ice hockey. That just happens to be sort of the sport of choice here. I do like it, but kind of pick any sport that you want. Or, I think especially I didn't have ice hockey in my high school. Basketball was huge, football was huge, ice hockey was huge at college, so I get it. But I think, whether it's soccer, football, whatever your thing is, I think it is safe to say most everyone understands the idea of having sort of this hero worship, incredible team, whether it is, at a high school, college, or professional level, and how everyone rallies around specific players, and they are the heroes of the team and sort of the ones with the God-given talent. And this team as a whole, like I said, kind of the entire town is on their shoulders. So this whole team is revered. And I think we can all sort of understand that sort of hero worship thing that happens with athletes. And you've got sort of that element and what people will do to belong and be accepted and fit in. And you also have this very realistic but troublesome depiction of bullying. And the book doesn't, condone it in any way, but I think there's a very realistic showing of, how horrible kids can be and bullying that happens and hazing that happens and sort of the, following the leader and, being the bully rather than the one being bullied. And there's, depictions of sort of insecurity and learning, yearnings to belong. And, there's love and there's very complicated family relationships. And this town, while predominantly sort of, like I say, industrial and there's a lot of people who work in the factories, there's sort of this small group in the town who are the more affluent ones who own the supermarket, who aren't the people who work in the supermarket. Or one of the moms is a lawyer and she travels to, whatever the closest city to be an attorney because she can't be sort of a thriving attorney in the town. And you've got sort of class issues that happen and you've got issues of money. And there's just so many layers to this book and so many complicated layers. And I think what sort of continues to kind of resonate with me and why I keep thinking about it is it really makes you think, what would you do in a lot of these circumstances? And I think, I think at my age, looking back to high school, I think it's very easy for me to say now, oh, I would have done this, but I also know what I was like at 16 and I know what I did when I was 16. So I think, it's very interesting to think about how you would react or what you would say or what, whose side you would be on or who you would be supporting or, what you would say or what you would keep to yourself. And, all of these factors, I think, just further create such an incredible book. And I'll admit it's super tricky to talk about this book without talking about plot points or specific people because I'm afraid I'm just going to say too much. But I think the way that Fredrik Backman made so many of these characters so complicated. And again, whether it was the high school student or the adult, there is so much happening in these people's lives, and what motivates them and decisions that they've made. And like I said, so many of these people were born and bred in this town, and you have, you think about it. I mean, how many people are going to play a high school sport and turn pro? And you have all these people, these men who, playing hockey in Beartown was their life, but then you sort of reach a point where you're not going to go any further than that. So you've got kind of the lost dreams, and now they're watching kind of the next generation play the game, and the emotions those people are dealing with, sort of staring their lost dream in the face. And I am someone who, I can cry. Give me some This Is Us. I mean, sometimes give me some Riverdale. I mean, I will cry at a TV show. I'll cry at a movie. It takes a lot for a book to make me cry, because I think, the writing of certain emotions is not, always as powerful to me. But this book, I cried a bunch, and I said this in another video too, 60 or so pages in, I was already crying. And sometimes I was crying because I was sad. Sometimes I was crying because I was happy. Sometimes it was sympathy. Sometimes it was pain. I don't even know how many times I cried during this book, but I was so emotionally moved by this story. And again, I think so much of it goes to the physical writing of it. It was just such a moving book to me. And I cannot say enough. I mean, I could say a lot more about it, but I cannot say enough about how incredible this book was. I really like I said, I needed to sit with it for a few days, but I've already recommended it to a few people. I'm excited for more people to discover this book. So kind of one of the reasons I wanted to make this video was to sort of shout from the mountaintops. If you have not read Beartown, pick this book up, because I mean, I hesitate to say life-changing, but I think it was really just, it's absolutely one of the best books I feel like I've ever read. And I don't say that lightly. I've mentioned before, I'm a firm believer that there is kind of a right time for you to read a book, and whether it's sort of where you are in your life, or, books sort of speak to you at different times. This was my time for Beartown, and I'm happy with it. And the other upside of me waiting this long to read it is there's a sequel to Beartown, Us Against You, I keep calling it Us Against Them, that's already out. So I can jump right back into the story with all of these people, which I'm very excited about. Although, like I said, I'm gonna breathe for a little bit. I want to give the story kind of some more time to just sort of sit with me before I jump into it. And I also know that when I finish this, then it's over, which I'm not happy about, but I'm happy that I have this, and I'm for sure probably going to read it in February, because I think that's probably as long as I'm going to be able to wait. And I was online like a crazy person afterwards, because I was trying to, find out all sorts of stuff about it, and about Beartown, not the sequel. And I saw somewhere that supposedly it was the rights were purchased to turn it into a TV show. So I don't know if this is complete fiction, complete fact. I don't really know. I don't know if it's overseas that it's going to happen. I don't know if it's here. So I'm going to kind of compulsively be checking up on this one, because it absolutely could make for an incredible kind of 10-part, whatever, Handmaid's Tale style type of show. So I would love if that's actually going to happen. And I had also read that this is supposed to be a trilogy. So again, I don't know if that's true or not. I hate to assume, but I'm going to assume that I'm going to really enjoy this, because, well, Beartown for sure could have been a standalone. There absolutely is an opening for what comes next. And I personally do not feel done with so many of these characters. So I'm excited to kind of see what happens next for them. And I would like to believe I'm going to want to find out again what's next for them after this book is done. Clearly I could talk all day about Beartown, but I'm not going to, so I will save you guys kind of any more chit chat. But I would love to know if you plan on picking up the book. If you haven't already, do it. Get it out of the library. Don't feel like you need to go buy it. I for sure am going to buy it now, because I need to write all over it, and I need to have it in my life and somewhere on my messy shelf behind me. I would also love to know, just kind of in general, do people like book review videos? Do you find these helpful? Do you tune into them because you're curious about a book and if you want to read it, or do you tune into them because you've read a book and you'd like to know what other people think about it? I'd also be curious, like, is a book review video without spoilers helpful? Would you prefer spoilers, which would have tons of warnings all over it, obviously? I mean, I'm here for so many reasons, but one of them is because I love to talk about books, and I would love to continue to kind of do these one-off book reviews on books that like really, you know, really kind of speak to me and really leave a mark with me and that really excite me. So I am happy to continue doing these videos, but I would love to know, because I've heard mixed bags that people do and don't like book review videos. So any insight of kind of what you go to book review videos for, what's missing, what's helpful, what's not, I would love to kind of hear that kind of information too. So thank you guys, as always, for tuning in and for hanging out today. And hopefully I will see you back here with the next video, which will be coming out soon. Bye, everybody.